With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yolana Weeks.
Our top stories. Senior GIS officer shares how geographic information systems help St. Kitts and Nevis mitigate vulnerabilities in disaster response.
St. Kitts and Nevis' Director of Health Institutions makes a plea for more pharmacists on World Pharmacy Day. 5 pageant beauties sashed ahead of the 2025-2026 Miss St. Kitts Nevis Queen pageant.
New initiative in St. Lucia seeks to empower men and boys as 85% of homicide victims are male. The rapid growth of virtual assets has revolutionized global finance. However, the growth has also introduced new risks. Internationally, Netanyahu calls Palestinian recognition disgraceful as dozens walk out of United Nations speech. Now, the details. As Caribbean nations face intensifying climate challenges, understanding and mitigating vulnerabilities is paramount for small island developing states, SIDS. Geographic Information Systems, GIS, offer a transformative approach to identifying these critical areas, moving beyond traditional assessments to provide dynamic data-driven insights. Josiah Burkett, Senior GIS Officer in the Department of Planning, Ministry of Sustainable Development, highlights the pivotal role of GIS in this endeavor.
My job entails using data and technology to help decision makers make informed decisions. So what that means is we utilize Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, which is essentially mapping tools to help collect, analyze, visualize, and help decision makers see vulnerability and disasters in context to the environment. So as it relates to working with NEMA and what we do, we help NEMA visualize risk as well as assets. Critical infrastructure assets such as shelters, such as vulnerable areas and communities, and other important information as it relates to storm surge, flooding, hurricanes, etc. How we do that is we train as well as assist in mapping these assets. We go into the field with drones, with GPS devices, with tablets, and we capture data. We then use that data on our GIS tools to visualize and create maps, and then the decision makers such as the head of NEMA or even the NEMA district reps can visualize the information and plan for either disaster response or mitigation efforts.
The Senior GIS Officer shared some of the challenges related to these efforts.
Some of the challenges include getting accurate and up-to-date information. Data is always changing as time progresses, whether it's population information or changes in community infrastructure. Persons are building all the time, or sometimes a building would become no longer in use. So we always need to have up-to-date information, and that's a challenge when you have limited staff. So that's another challenge, or resources such as the software and hardware. Those are primarily the main challenges, but we find ways to overcome them nonetheless. It just takes more time to update the information based on the limitations we have.
Smart maps integrate diverse data layers, from population density to intricate weather patterns, to paint a comprehensive picture of vulnerability. This sophisticated layering enables the precise identification of communities and infrastructure most vulnerable to climate impacts. It also emphasizes the invaluable contribution of local knowledge in strengthening these analytical tools.
So a vulnerable area is considered an area that is most likely to be harmed if a natural event such as a storm, flooding, hurricane, landslide was to occur, and it would have a more devastating impact than usual. So vulnerability means the likelihood of an area or a person to be impacted by a natural or human event, such as a storm, a hurricane, flooding, or even pollution.
According to Burkett, there is a role for citizens to play in recognizing vulnerability in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
The citizens know their communities better than anyone else. So when a vulnerable event occurs, or when your area is experiencing some of these natural or human-made events, we want you to document it. We want you to communicate it, because you are the ones being impacted, and the way you communicate that would help us now better prepare to help mitigate that vulnerability. So what persons can look for to determine if their area or their community is vulnerable or not would include low-lying areas, flat areas, especially those close to the coast or close to guts, that's more likely prone to flooding. So paying attention during heavy rainfalls, especially when storms are passing, if there's flooding occurring, you are in a vulnerable area. You can also look for land slippage or mass movement of soil. If there is heavy rainfall or an event such as an earthquake, you are vulnerable to landslides or land slippage. And also storm surge. If you live on the coast and you realize that the water is coming closer and closer to where you live, you are exposed to storm surge and you are in a vulnerable area. So those are some of the things that persons can look at in their community to identify if it's vulnerable or not.
This practical application underscores how technology translates complex data into actionable strategies, enabling authorities and residents alike to enhance their preparedness and response capabilities.
The importance of historical knowledge, if you're new to an area, would help you prepare in the event that that vulnerability or that hazard was to occur again. So for example, if you're new to a community and you are aware that this community is prone to flooding, when the rainy season comes, you prepare for that. You ensure that your house is prepared, your yard is prepared, the drains are cleared, so that you are least likely to be heavily impacted by that. Sometimes you can't avoid certain things, but the more you prepare, the less you're impacted. If someone wanted to report a vulnerable area or a vulnerability incident in their area, what we would recommend is you document it. We believe citizens are also part of data collection, and if there is something happening in your area, such as flooding, you should take pictures, you should contact your NEMA district rep or NEMA themselves, document what happened, who was affected, if there was some sort of major incident that's out of the norm, and then we can add that to our data sets to help plan to prevent this from happening again.
Burkett explained GIS facilitates crucial decision-making using a tsunami vulnerability map as a compelling case study.
So there is a vulnerability map for the Federation. Again, based on the challenges I identified, it isn't up to date based on some gaps, but it is useful in at least understanding which areas are vulnerable to what and how we can plan for future incidents. The Port Zante area shows if a tsunami wave of 100 feet was to hit the island, all the communities that would be impacted. As you can see, if you're looking at the Port Zante area, a lot of the communities along the coast, including Irish Town all the way to the Ponds area, will be impacted. Now, this helps decision makers quantify how many persons may be impacted and also inform citizens of are you in that zone, that impacted zone, and where you should go so that you can be safe. So it's another example of how data is important to communicate the risk of vulnerability of an area and how persons can plan and prepare for such incidents.
Geographic Information Systems, GIS, empowers communities not only to recognize but also to actively participate in pinpointing the risks that threaten their resilience.
Dr. Jensen Morton, the Director of Health Institutions, underscored the critical role pharmacists play in the delivery of healthcare as the Federation joined the global observance of World Pharmacy Day, September 25, 2025.
The pharmacists play an integral role in the overall health system and health scheme. They are the ones that deal with the distribution and the dispensation of life-saving medication to our citizens. So they not only are responsible for that, but they're also responsible for the background work that is associated with the pharmacology, which includes the stock taking, checking of the expiration of all of our medications, for the listing of what needs to be ordered in terms of what medications are absolutely needed in the Federation. They also do their work with regards to the background research for the efficacy of the medications, especially if the medication is a new one or if the medication is one which is from a new source or a new supplier. And it's not just what people see before them. There are other aspects of the medication, such as the mixing of medication for oncology patients. and many other background things that are happening in the field of pharmacology.
In an exclusive interview with WINN FM, Dr. Morton expressed concern over the shortage of pharmacists from St. Kitts and Nevis. He called on nationals interested in health-related careers to consider studying pharmacology, highlighting that the profession offers rewarding opportunities and is an important service to the community.
So right now in the Federation, we don't have as many local pharmacists as we would absolutely like. Currently in the government system, we only have one individual that has a bachelor's in pharmacy that is employed by us. And all of the other pharmacists that we have are persons that we're very grateful for that have immigrated to our shores. Even though we have been able to meet our pharmacology demands with regards to the human resources, it really would be appreciated if more persons in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis would think about pursuing getting their bachelor's degree in pharmacy and coming home to work in our local health system. It's a promising field that can prove to be very rewarding, and it's one which is absolutely needed. Now, on top of this, we also have pharmacy technicians. These are the persons that work in the pharmacies and that help the pharmacists to do the overall work involved in pharmacy. We do have some pharmacy techs that are certified pharmacy techs in our system, and we will encourage persons, if you want to take a first step, that is something that can be explored.
To address the shortage of homegrown pharmacists, Dr. Morton mentioned the possibility of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College introducing a certificate program in pharmacology. The program aims to provide aspiring pharmacists with a strong academic foundation and increase the number of trained professionals in the field.
There are plans to offer a certified pharmacy technician course at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College in the near future. And if that becomes a reality, again, I would like to encourage persons in the Federation that are interested in this field to pursue getting this certification.
Meanwhile, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis spends approximately $17 million annually for the procurement of medicine and medical supplies. The medications are procured through the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, pool system.
The relationship between the government-run pharmacies and the private-run pharmacies is actually pretty healthy. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis, every year, we spend to the tune of approximately $17 million on medication and medical supplies for the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, although that is a large amount, we still are unable to meet absolutely all of our medical demands that our citizens have. And to plug those gaps, we have a very good relationship with the private pharmacies. It's not all of the medication types that we can have in our system. Sometimes different companies, they can make different formulations of the same medication. And some of these different formulations, they tend to have, different benefits, sometimes decreased side effects, etc. In the government system, we get our medication from the OECS procurement pool system, which is the same procurement pool system that the governments of the other OECS territories use. It's in an attempt to decrease the overall cost of the medication.
The Director of Health Institutions commended the strong partnership between the government-operated and private-run pharmacies, which he said has been instrumental in maintaining reliable and consistent access to essential medications. He explained that their collaboration has been especially important in navigating supply chain challenges.
On different occasions, because of the reality of things, and also sometimes because of some issues because of the procurement pool system, even though usually it's not really the fault of the system itself. When we're trying to get medications ordered, all of the OECS territories have to basically pay the bill for the medication that's needed. And if there's a delay in any of the territories, it can result in a delay in the shipment of the medication for all of the territories. When something like that happens, we need, in some instances, the private pharmacies to have some of these medications to help us until the stocks can get replenished from the procurement pool system. So we have a good relationship with our private pharmacies. They have a good relationship with us. And between the two of us, we try to ensure that the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis are provided with all of their medication needs.
The Director of Health Institutions extended World Pharmacy Day greetings to all the individuals working in the field of pharmacology and expressed hope that in the near future that pharmaceutical services in the Federation will be strengthened. The sashing ceremony for the 2025-2026 Miss St. Kitts Nevis Queen Pageant contestants was held at Karambola on Thursday night, September 25, 2025, another step in the ambassador's journey to the crown. Though already formally introduced to the public on July 7, 2025, the ambassadors were finally sashed on September 25, signaling their representation of their individual sponsors. They were each sashed by their sponsors and represented with a bouquet and a picture of themselves. Ambassador number 1, Miss First Federal Credit Union, Liberty Woodley. Ambassador number 2, Miss Urban Development Corporation, Alicia Nisbet. Ambassador number 3, Miss St. Kitts Music Festival, Tirani Phillip. Ambassador number 4, Miss Azul Printers, Treasure Didier. Ambassador number 5, Miss Carrie Brewery St. Kitts Nevis Limited, Adele Archibald. A sixth-person pageant beauty Zidania Phillip was introduced to the public on the night of the grand reveal, but with no official sighting of her for a while, leaves one to suggest that she opted not to continue the journey. Miss Shannon Harley, chairperson of St. Kitts and Nevis National Carnival, expressed that the sashing ceremony marks an important step to Coronation Night. The pageant journey, she explained, impacts the lives of the ambassadors greatly and also showcases the talent and innovative ideas of their teams, bringing a unique flair and excitement to the pageant.
Welcome to the sashing ceremony of the 2025 Miss St. Kitts and Nevis Queen Pageant Ambassadors. This ceremony for us is significant as it underscores the importance of the Miss St. Kitts and Nevis Queen Pageant and Sugar Mass to the Federation, as well as it confirms and solidifies the support of our corporate community for St. Kitts and Nevis Carnival, as well as for our ambassadors. The Miss St. Kitts and Nevis Queen Pageant is much more than just a beauty competition. It has been in existence for the past 52 years and has withstood the test of time. It is a joyful celebration of our rich culture and cultural preservation, and most importantly, every year the pageant molds and empowers young women and provides a vital platform for these young women to cultivate confidence, grace, and leadership through development sessions and social engagements that will serve them for a lifetime. The pageant does not focus solely on the ambassadors. It also involves their dedicated team of chaperones, stylists, choreographers, and coaches whose innovative talents, year in and out, bring this event to life.
Ms. Hawley unveiled the theme for the competition, a theme which highlights a timely and critical issue for the region. Through the pageant, the organizers hope to highlight solutions and encourage behavioral changes.
Every year, our pageant's theme guides meaningful conversations and awareness in the community. This year's theme, Droplets of Hope, the impact of global warming on water, underscores one of the most urgent issues of our time, climate change, and its profound effect on our vital water resources.
As preparations continue, the Carnival chairperson encouraged the public to follow the journey of the ambassadors leading up to Coronation Night, slated for December 23 at the Marriott Event Dome. With a mix of glamour, culture, and advocacy, the event promises to crown a queen and raise awareness about water conservation and climate action. In his remarks, the Creative Economy Minister Samal Duggins expressed confidence in the growth of the sugar mass product and the pageant itself. He highlighted that the pageant serves as a platform to showcase talent while promoting culture and national pride.
And tonight is special, at least for me it is. And it's special because the pride that I get when I look at where we are now as a country and the part of our culture that we are developing, not just as a sugar mass product, but as we specifically talk about Miss Sinkis and Nevis Queen pageant, I don't know if we recognize that this pageant has been ingrained in who we are. I have known young women who for years grew up with the intention to become Miss Sinkis and Nevis. And if we take a careful consideration as to what that means, we'll then see the importance of a pageant like this. Because pageants like these are not just beauty contests. It's not just about young women who want to showcase their good looks, but it's also a display of talent. It's also a display of cultural development and preservation. It's also a builder of self-esteem and national pride. You see, these young ladies, during preparation and after, are not just winning crowns, they are becoming ambassadors. They are becoming symbols of what it means to be Kititians and Nevisians. They represent who we are on the regional and international stage, and not just locally.
Speaking directly to the ambassadors, the Creative Economy Minister encouraged them to be positive role models to the next generation of young women. He expressed to them that the role they play should be what girls far and near would like to emulate.
And I turn to the young women and say to you, ensure that your role here empowers the next generation of young girls to want to be just like you. And ensure that that is a positive thing. Ensure that every country, far and near, looks at Sinkis and Nevis through your depiction of it and say, we want to be just like that. Because it is in you doing that, we are all assured that Sinkis and Nevis will be a better place for all of us. You see, you have a role to play. You are now becoming ambassadors and role models. And it is that role that you should hold dear.
Minister Duggins also thanked the corporate community for time and time again supporting the pageant. He told the sponsors that they are giving more than financial donations. They are giving support to the development and empowerment of countless young women.
In regional news, new initiative in St. Lucia seeks to empower men and boys as 85% of homicide victims are male, DBS St. Lucia reports.
The organization's mission is to raise morally grounded men and leaders at a time when male victimization and absent fathers are contributing to single-parent households and social instability. President Kevin Maffrey says the need for positive male role models is greater than ever.
It is statistically and data proven that young men are falling behind in education, especially higher education. Young men are not interested in higher education. We can look at the health-wise. Goes back to institutions. Young men are not interested. Young men do not care about their health. A lot of young men are not interested in the development of the society. They're not interested in being part of society and making a meaningful contribution.
Maffrey stresses that the way boys are conditioned from an early age shapes the men they become, and he is urging parents to instill core values that steer children away from criminal tendencies. He also believes schools should reframe civic duty to empower young men as future contributors to society. As a youth counselor, Maffrey argues that criminality is only one aspect of the wider male crisis.
There are a lot of things that's happening before the stages of criminality, and that's where ideas come in. That's why we want to bring in the solution. We cannot go in when they're lost. We want to look at the at-risk males. We don't want to deal with criminality. It's out of our hands. We want to deal with the at-risk males, the young males, those that are 14, 15, those that are in secondary schools, primary schools. We want preventative measures. We want reactive measures. And that's what the organization is about.
Despite being a newly registered group, Ideas for Boys and Men Inc. has already attracted stakeholder support. Maffrey announced plans for upcoming events designed to shift the atmosphere around male empowerment. He is encouraging citizens to participate, noting the importance of creating safe spaces in communities where men can share concerns and support one another.
The 10th of December, 2025 itself, the financial literacy for financial literacy for young men, and what we have seen and the data from the UN, we bring about 100 or about 60 young men, and we have speakers from the state, we have speakers from the markets, we have speakers from the communities to let the young men know how financial development is important for them, because they're probably in that area.
Mathres says these initiatives will focus on skills development, mental health, awareness and financial literacy, with the first Financial Literacy Summit scheduled for December 10, 2025 at the Bexor Impact Ministries building. He hopes that the knowledge shared will inspire young men to set crime aside and instead become empowered leaders within their communities. For the DBS Newsworld, Manasseh Stanislas reporting.
The rapid growth of virtual assets has revolutionized global finance. However, the growth has also introduced new risks. Triple T Live Online has the details.
As government aims to crack down on virtual asset service providers and the use of virtual assets, commonly defined as cryptocurrency, some tech CEOs believes that there needs to be proper licensing and regulation for virtual asset service providers and the sector on a whole. President of the FinTech Association, Alexander Gafur, provided these recommendations to alleviate any issues affiliated with rogue virtual assets service providers.
So one of the main recommendations would be to broaden the definition of virtual asset while really niching down on what we want that definition to look like. So creating parameters while creating different classes and ensuring that everything doesn't fall into a one-size-fits-all approach.
And CEO of Z Labs, Mark Pereira, said government during the moratorium should consider restructuring how business can be done using crypto, especially for SMEs. Then it can position our country as leaders in fintech in the region in the future.
The global market opportunity that has been opened with these virtual assets is now being realized with the evolution of the currency. That's really where we want the nation to take forefront, is to be ahead of the curve with this innovation because of how empowering it is for the small businesses and the individuals who are currently using it to solve their forex problems.
Acknowledging that rogue actors have shed a negative light on the virtual asset sector, Mr. Pereira is hopeful that during the moratorium, these players can be identified and weeded out.
The bad actors are just there making all the profits that could have been going to our current fintechs, but they are now causing a bad name for fintechs in the country.
Among the recommendations, a provisional licensing framework, a progressive framework that enables providers to operate under central bank supervision and meeting the requirements of FATF, and consideration of amendments to the legislation with good fintech actors during the moratorium. Government's proposed ban of the sale, exchange or transfer of cryptocurrencies, which include Bitcoin and Ethereum, until December 31st, 2027, comes via the Virtual Asset and Service Providers Bill 2025. I'm Charlene Lewis for TTT News.
We now bring you these international reports.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has finished addressing the United Nations General Assembly in New York. He attacked Western governments who've recognized the Palestinian state, accusing them of terrorism against Jews and innocent people everywhere. He denied Israel was committing genocide in Gaza and addressed Israeli hostages held there directly, telling them Israel wouldn't rest until they had been brought home.
Please, order in the hall.
Well, as Benjamin Netanyahu took to the stage, dozens of people filed out of the auditorium there in New York, and some applauded.
This week, the leaders of France, Britain, Australia, Canada, and other countries unconditionally recognized a Palestinian state.
Well, that was Benjamin Netanyahu's address. It was broadcast live into Gaza on loudspeakers. Now, outside the United Nations in New York, protests have been taking place calling for sanctions on Israel. So let's hear a little of what the Israeli Prime Minister had to say.
For much of the past 2 years, Israel has had to fight a seven-front war against barbarism, with many of your nations opposing us. Astoundingly, as we fight the terrorists who murdered many of your citizens, you are fighting us. You condemn us, you embargo us, and you wage political and legal warfare, it's called lawfare, against us. I say to the representatives of those nations, this is not an indictment of Israel. It's an indictment of you. It's an indictment of weak-kneed leaders who appease evil rather than support a nation whose brave soldiers guard you from the barbarians at the gate. They're already penetrating your gates.
Well, Mr. Netanyahu spoke for about 45 minutes. He also called out the UK, France, Australia and others for not showing support for Israel.
Yet over time, many world leaders buckled. They buckled under the pressure of a biased media, radical Islamist constituencies, and anti-Semitic mobs. There's a familiar saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, for many countries here, when the going got tough, you caved. And here's the shameful result of that collapse. For much of the past 2 years, Israel has had to fight a seven-front war against barbarism, with many of your nations opposing us. Astoundingly, as we fight the terrorists who murdered many of your citizens, you are fighting us. You condemn us, you embargo us, and you wage political and legal warfare, it's called lawfare, against us. I say to the representatives of those nations, this is not an indictment of Israel. It's an indictment of you.
The Reuters news agency is reporting Donald Trump on Gaza, saying, I think we may have a deal. No other detail apart from that one line, but it's worth bringing to you. So let's go to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, who's there at the United Nations. Lise, I'll come to that element in a moment or two, but that speech, give me your snapshot assessment first of all.
Matthew, I'm just digesting what you just reported about this line, just as everyone is reflecting on that hard-hitting, defiant speech by Prime Minister Netanyahu, taking on the growing momentum around the world, which has been reflected here all this last week at the world's top table, with the vast majority of countries, including more and more Western countries, recognizing the right of the Palestinians to have their own state. And calling for the war to end now, not after more military operations, as Prime Minister Netanyahu continues to push inside Israel. And then to have that statement by President Trump, that one line saying, I believe we have a deal. Now, President Trump would be referring to, there's been a buzz here, Matthew, among Arab leaders here, among Western diplomats, saying that they believe there's the best chance now that when Prime Minister Netanyahu goes to the White House on Monday, that President Trump will make it clear that the Israeli hostages should come home now and the war should end. Not end next month or next year, end now. So it's always hard to read into what President Trump has to say. Let me bring in our North America correspondent, Nada Taufik. Very interesting, Nada, because we already had President Trump making it clear there will be no annexation of the West Bank. Prime Minister Netanyahu didn't really address that in his speech, but he made it absolutely clear that even though he wanted the war to end, there would be no Palestinian state.
Yeah, and just looking back to what President Trump said in his address here, he didn't speak about Gaza that much, but he said very clearly, I still have to get a ceasefire, I want to get a ceasefire, and did focus his remarks on the hostages. We know that President Trump has felt, under the American deals in the past, that's how hostages were released. We know he's been wanting to see that happen. So perhaps there is a breakthrough. We've heard the word breakthrough numerous times before, but as you say, Arab leaders here met with Steve Witkoff, President Trump's team, and did come out feeling a sense of renewed optimism. So perhaps we'll see something. And it is notable, as you say, given everyone's fears that Benjamin Netanyahu would come here and, as defiant as he was in that speech, be even more aggressive toward calling for annexation, something we know those in the far right of his party want to see happen. He didn't make that statement, and yet very clear that he is under no way possible going to agree to a future Palestinian state. And as you mentioned, I mean, just going against, absolutely defiant in the face of the international community's overwhelming calls to get a peace process started. To do that, because as European leaders are saying, the reason they decided to recognize Palestinian statehood is because if they don't do it now, there won't be a state to recognize.
I hope there are this peace. You can't let this happen to a country.
U.S. President Donald Trump ratcheted up his retribution campaign against his political adversaries on Friday, following criminal charges filed against former FBI Director James Comey.
These were corrupt, radical left Democrats, because Comey essentially was he's worse than a Democrat. I would say the Democrats are better than Comey, but no, there'll be others.
The U.S. Justice Department charged Comey late Thursday with making false statements and obstructing a congressional investigation. In action, the Republican president pressured Attorney General Pam Bondi to get done. Meanwhile, Comey, in a video posted on Instagram, said he's innocent.
My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
Trump fired Comey in 2017, early in his first term in office. He has since regularly assailed Comey's handling of the FBI investigation that detailed contacts between Russians and Trump's 2016 campaign. Thursday's indictment alleges that Comey, in a 2020 testimony under oath, misled Congress by claiming he had not authorized anyone else to be an anonymous source in news reporting about an FBI investigation. Trump has threatened to imprison his political rivals since he first ran for president in 2015. But Thursday's indictment marks the first time his administration has succeeded in securing a grand jury indictment against one of them. Comey is slated to make his first appearance before the federal judge in the case on October 9th.
U.S. inflation is picking up, according to data out Friday, making the Federal Reserve's path on interest rates a little more complicated. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, ticked up 0.3% in August, in line with estimates. That put the annual inflation rate at 2.7%, the biggest yearly increase since February. Core inflation, which strips out food and energy, remained stuck at an annual rate of 2.9%. The Fed tracks the PCE index closely as it aims to lower inflation to an annual rate of 2%. Meanwhile, American consumers are still spending, and that's keeping U.S. economic growth on track. The Commerce Department says spending jumped 0.6% in August, beating forecasts. Signs of the economy's resilience were evident in other data this week, showing low layoff numbers and strong demand by businesses for equipment, leading some economists to argue against the need for another interest rate cut this year from the Fed. Still, traders on Friday were pricing in a roughly 88% chance of a rate cut in October, according to CME's FedWatch tool.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were: Senior GIS officer shares how geographic information systems help St. Kitts and Nevis mitigate vulnerabilities in disaster response.
St. Kitts and Nevis' Director of Health Institutions makes a plea for more pharmacists on World Pharmacy Day. 5 pageant beauties sashed ahead of the 2025-2026 Miss St. Kitts Nevis Queen pageant.
New initiative in St. Lucia seeks to empower men and boys, as 85% of homicide victims are male. The rapid growth of virtual assets has revolutionized global finance. However, the growth has also introduced new risks. Internationally, Netanyahu calls Palestinian recognition disgraceful as dozens walk out of United Nations speech.
Thank you for listening.